Hello, this is Alice Hill coming to you from Boss the Movement in this training session of Part 2 of the brain. We began to talk in the previous session about the power of the brain, how God made this 3 pounds of flesh and placed it on the inside of all of us, and the capacity of where the brain can operate in us is absolutely tremendous. And we see from those statistics that I gave that we have been using only a very, very small portion of our brain. But as we begin to walk in God's Word, and as we begin to understand how the brain works, we will learn how can we access the truth of God's Word and allow His truth to become dominant inside of us. The two areas of the focus in the brain teaching are on the teaching of the subconscious mind, and in the last session I began to share with you that the subconscious mind, its two focuses are on keeping the body alive and to operate in pleasure. And the way that we receive the data inside of our subconscious, or the filing system, or the past files, are basically through 4 doorways or 4 pathways. We started talking about the 5 senses as being one of them. How was data transferred into us as we were growing up? It's through our sense realm. But we learned that our 5 senses are not always reliable. The second area in which data was transferred into our past files or our subconscious mind was through reasoning. Reasoning is just a reorganization of the data that already exists inside of us. So if the data that already exists inside of us is incorrect data, if we just reorganize it and kind of think of it at a different point of view, if the data is incorrect and we reorganize incorrect data, garbage in means garbage out. So our reasoning cannot be reliable if the data is unreliable. The third area in which information has transferred inside of us is through intuition. Intuition is an inward knowing without any physical outward evidence of its proof or truth. For example, someone may say, I believe, look at a man and say, I believe you're going to be my husband. And based on that idea, that inner hunch, that inner intuition, they start moving out on that. And if you continue to do that, especially at an intense level, that's more stalking than anything else. So can we rely just on an inward hunch or intuition without any confirmation whatsoever 100% of the time? The answer is no. So now that I've gone over 3, I've gone over the 3 areas in which data has been transferred into our filing system. The 3 areas are 5 senses. We can't rely on them 100% of the time. Reasoning, data in, bad data out. We can't rely on that 100% of the time. Intuition, an inward knowing, no outward confirmation. We can't rely on that 100% of the time. My goodness, are we seeing that so much of what's been transferred inside of us has been unreliable? Well, let's look at one of the most dominant pathways in which we received information. Is through the 4th one, which is our culture and our authority. The culture, the environment that we grew up in, the leadership, those that we submitted to, whether they're parents, grandparents, teachers, the adults in the community, community leaders, the political leaders, the pastors, many, many types of leaders in our community that had many, many voices. Those voices decreed truth that they believe or they said was information of truth. Now, if we open ourselves up and submitted to that and received it as truth, then we could possibly have data inside of us that's not accurate. So all the four methods, let's go over them again. 5 senses, reasoning, intuition, culture, and authority. We're seeing very clearly that all four methods in which we got our data transferred inside of us, and we walk in that data, we see that all of them in certain areas was and is contaminated information. So if we are to find out what is the truth, we must find a new door, a new pathway to submit to. Let's look at the conscious mind. The conscious mind, the purpose of the conscious mind is to do this: to first recognize, secondly, identify, thirdly, organize, and to file away for future use. In order to operate in this at a higher level, we must allow the conscious mind, our will, I choose to, our will, that's our conscious, when we will to do something, to become the dominant area in our lives. Not the subconscious mind, meaning we live off the old filing system, the old habits of which we see many of them are incorrect information. So we must transfer and allow our conscious mind to become the dominant area of our way of life. So the power has now been transferred from the subconscious to the conscious mind. Now let me tell you something about this process. The subconscious mind is very, 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 very stubborn. It does not easily release its ability to be the dominant one in our lives. We must take it by force because the subconscious will not release it. Now, how do you practice the ability to release that power from the subconscious mind? It's a method to do that. The method is called problem solving. Problem solving. When a problem comes into our lives and we are trained to become problem solvers, we must shift over to our conscious mind. What our conscious mind will begin to do is to ask questions. When we ask questions, we're now just like a computer, we're seeking and searching for new answers that are not necessarily in the subconscious mind. We're looking for new doors, new pathways, new avenues, new way of life that we in the past have not operated in. So as we ask questions, we will get new answers, new doorways, new pathways. Now we have the opportunity to make new choices. And if we repetitiously make new choices will now become an easy way of life. And those new choices will now become a pleasure. Remember, the subconscious mind loves to operate in pleasure. So we're now transferring that over, that energy over. And once those new choices become a pleasure, those new choices will be done often, and those new choices, here's the key, will become a new habit. They are now filed into our filing system as a dominant way of life for us. So we have, through the conscious mind, transferred a new way of life into our character through the repetition process of problem solving. So here's a question. If we are to allow our conscious mind to operate in us, should we run to problems or should we run away from problems? When we run away from problems, our subconscious mind and the old habits dominate our lives. But when we consciously run to problems, ask questions, get new answers, make new choices, do that repetitiously, we have now, through that process, transferred the conscious mind into our way of life. And this is done through recognizing, identifying, organizing, and filing new information away. So I've just explained what the conscious mind does through the process of recognizing this is not the way that I want to live, identifying what is the way, organizing, going through that activity repetitiously until it becomes dominant, and now grouping that activity and filing it as a new habit. Now, here's a question that we may ask. Oh my goodness, I see that I have such bad habits in my lives. How do I change that? And we began to explain that process already. One of the dominant ways is through repetition, and I just explained that of how that's done. The second dominant way is called through shock. Something instantly happens in our lives. In a quick second, God will bring a miracle or a quick amount of information into us until it's a surprise, it's a shock. It's a dominant way of transferring instantly information from one thought to another. The third way of transferring and changing is through the power of speaking in tongues. Now, God has given to the born-again believer many gifts, and one of those gifts is the ability to speak in the heavenly language. Now, we can choose to believe that and do that, or we can choose not to do it. It's completely up to you. But for those of you who choose to speak in that heavenly language, here's what you're doing. Let's again look at the subconscious mind and the conscious mind. The subconscious mind operates in a language called logic, meaning they have to understand it from the outside in, not from the inside out. And the language of logic is confirmed through your five senses, through reasoning, intuition, culture, and authority. But God's language is the language of faith. That language comes into us from the inside out through what? Dreams, visions, and ideas. So, if God has given us a dream, vision, and idea from the inside out, that language is showing us a vision, an answer, a solution. But logic from the outside in is showing us different pictures. So the two are like the computer system, where you have two systems that are not compatible. They're not workable. They don't flow together. So how do you allow the conscious and the subconscious to operate? One of the methods, and profound method God has used, is called speaking in tongues. Logic is a subconscious mind, which it says, I don't logically agree with speaking in tongues. I don't logically understand what I'm saying, so I'm not going to submit to it. God's language is faith. God says, submit to it. Open up your mouth, move your tongue, and I will give you a language to speak. You do not have to logically understand what that language is. Now, once we submit ourselves and allow ourselves to speak those words, now, what do words do? Words are to be converted into picture images. Now, whether we logically understand the words or not, words will still do what words do. Words transfer into picture images when you speak them. And the more authoritatively you speak, the more energy you give them to decree those visual pictures on the perceptive area of your mind. So once you're speaking in tongues and allow that heavenly language to be downloaded into you, that language can now transfer over into your filing system. How? The logical mind does not understand the language, so therefore the logical mind cannot block it. If the logical mind cannot block those words can be now transferred into your filing system. Now let's look at this from a computer standpoint. If you have a computer and you're trying to get into that computer, but you have lost the keywords, you've forgotten your passwords, well, you can call up the manufacturer of that computer, and they have a way of getting into that computer through the back door. They don't have to go through your password, your logical mind. They can go through another mind, another system, another code, another password, and get into that computer and open it up and allow information to be downloaded into it. Who is the manufacturer of the brain? God. God knows how that brain works. So if we set aside our logical mind and submit to another password, another code, another language, allow that language to be downloaded into us, be bypassed into our past files, now those files can be renewed and we can receive new information, which is the truth, which is the reason why we're studying the brain anyway, to follow the truth. And now Romans 12:2 can manifest into our minds as being a renewed Christian through the edification of God inside of us. So through the teaching of the brain, we have now learned how the subconscious mind works, how the conscious mind works, and how we can renew our mind through repetition, shock, and tongues. And through these systems, we can walk in God's truth, which is what we're called to do. Thank you so much for listening to the teaching. Hello, this is Alice Hill coming to you from Boss the Movement, Building on Spiritual Substance. The spiritual substance or principle that we're going to share with you today is out of the Bible. It is Mark chapter 11, starting at verse 22. The reason that we teach this principle in Vertical Leap as well as with the youth in Boss the Movement, it answers a question. And here's the question. It has to do with, how did Jesus perform a miracle? It's a foundational concept of how Jesus allowed things to happen. How did he perform the miracles that he did? That's the question. The answer is provided in Mark chapter 11. Now let's look at the story of how Jesus performed this specific miracle. Jesus and his disciples were walking into town one day, and afar off he saw a fig tree that was not bearing fruit. So Jesus spoke to that fig tree, and he cursed it from the root up. The disciples saw him. The disciples heard him. Then, the following day, as they were coming back from out of town, on that pathway, Peter saw the same tree. It was dead. It had been cursed or dried up from the root up. So Peter, being inquisitive, he asked Jesus the question, Jesus, how did you do that? How did that miracle happen? And that's the question that we present to you today. And this is a question to present to the youth. Let the youth know that Jesus operated in kingdom principles. So the question is, how did Jesus perform the miracle? And here is the answer. I will be reading from the Bible. So as I look down from time to time, and this is what we will ask you to do in the class. Open up the Bible to Mark chapter 11 and give the example of the story. If you would like, you can read the actual story that brought them up to the point of verse 22. Mark 11, verse 22. And Jesus answering said unto them, Jesus answering what? He answered the question that Peter asked. Jesus, how did you perform that miracle? So verse 22 is, and Jesus answering said unto them. So the disciples were there. Peter was the only one that asked the question, but the disciples are getting the benefit. He says, first of all, have faith in God. So we highlight that word faith. Have faith in God. For verily I say unto you, that whosoever shall say, so say is key, unto this mountain, be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea, and shall not doubt in his heart, but shall believe, that's a key word, he shall have whatsoever he saith. Number 24. Therefore I say unto you, what things soever you desire when ye pray. So pray is very important, prayer. Believe, belief is very important. Believe that ye shall receive them and ye shall have them. The miracle being performed. 25. And when ye stand praying, forgive. Forgive is key to this principle. If ye have aught against any, that your Father also, which is in heaven, may forgive you your trespasses. But, verse 26, if ye do not forgive, neither will your Father, which is in heaven, forgive you your trespasses. So there are key elements to how this happened. There are key principles to how the miracle took place. So the question is, we lay the foundation. We open ourselves up. And you can ask the students, what is the question in this teaching? The question is, how did Jesus perform the miracle? Who asked that question? Asked that question. Peter asked that question. So Jesus is giving them the answer. And through the key elements of that answer, we are training our youth through this formula called Mark 11. Now, anything that can be done through truth can also be connected to a mathematical equation in some form or shape. So we have taken this truth of performing a miracle and connected it to a mathematical equation. And as you look in your notebook, you will see it. Mark 11, formula. The first word or first letter we have connected to that formula is P. The P stands for prayer. The question is, what is prayer? Prayer is talking to God. Now, key in this question is, should most of our talking go upward? All of the words flow upward, 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 and we just ask God to listen to us? Or should so much of our connecting with God in worship and praise flow from God, who has all the answers, all the solutions, move from God to man? And then our time with God is the thanksgiving, the worship and praise coming out of us. That should be the majority of our substance coming out of us, is thanksgiving, worship, praise, adoration to our Father God. And as we set that atmosphere, God will be ready to transfer into us dreams, visions, ideas, solutions to problems. Our purpose shall be transferred into us. So what is prayer? Prayer is communication and talking and listening to God. What's the next thing? We need to pray in faith. What's that? We need to pray moving. Moving. How do we move? We're asking. We're seeking. We're knocking. How do we move? We're asking. We're seeking. We're knocking. So as we're listening to God, we're asking, seeking, and knocking. How should we ask? The next part is time say. We shall speak with authority, decree and establish. Speak with our birthrights. That's a principle that we've taught in Boston Movement. Our birthrights are confidence, courage, hope, belief, faith, and trust in God, who is the source of our hope. So we need to decree and speak with confidence and courage and hope. Then the next part of that formula is minus doubt. We need to subtract the doubt out of our lives. How do you consciously do that? You shift away from the language of logic for what you see from the outside in, and you shift to the language of faith, what you see from the inside out. God has given you the answer, the dreams, the vision, and the ideas. Now, how do you stay focused on the picture images that are in you? You do that based on your level of trust in God, who is the source of those words. So as you build up your trust, it will diminish the doubt. So as you minus the doubt, you add belief. It says plus believe. How do you build up your belief? You go through the same process. You trust in God, who's the source of your hope. So you remember all the good things. You remember the good things that God has done for you. Now you have built up your belief. The next phase is times forgiveness. We must forgive. We must open up ourselves. We must not be bottlenecked and shut down so that when the blessings come, they're choked from moving through us. How do we operate in forgiveness? Well, this is a question. Ask this question to the youth. What does forgiveness represent? And when you ask that question, you will get many different answers. Hopefully, why? Because they're thinking. But the key that we're looking for in terms of what forgiveness represents operating in God's now. Unforgiveness represents in operating in the past. So when we are in unforgiveness, we have now brought the issues of the past, the problems of the past, the thoughts of the past into the now. And when we bring the past into the now, we're no longer connected in the zone of God, the now zone of God. We're disconnected. And when we're disconnected, God cannot flow through us because we have disconnected. But to stay connected in God, we operate in the now. And in operating in the now, all that we have is the now. Not the things of the past, but the now. So we release those things of the past. We forgive. We ask God to forgive us for our trespasses first, so that He will forgive us. And now we have been released. Now we have been cleansed. And because of that, the prayer, the faith, the speaking, the trusting, the belief can now all flow through us. And I mentioned in another training session that the invisible ideas and thoughts that are inside of us, they are urgently and critically seeking a physical expression in the earth realm. So once we are cleansed from unforgiveness, we have now opened up. The bottleneck is no longer there. So the physical expression of those visions and dreams flow out of us, and they're now manifested as a material thing, which we see as the miracle. Let's look at this formula in a numerical format. Let's give the prayer 10. Oh, we want to pray, and we do pray. We know how to pray, so we give that a 10. Let's give the prayer and faith, let's give that faith walk a 5. So 10 times 5 is what? 50. Let's give the speaking part a 5 also. Okay? Let's give the minus doubt. That's a little bit. Let's give that a 1. A little doubt. Not enough to destroy the miracle, but just a little. Plus believe. Let's give that belief a 5. So in multiplying all those numbers, we should get 400. So we will see we have 400 working on our behalf. That can be very, very powerful. 400 of anything working on our behalf. But then when we step into the forgiveness, if we are in the past and disconnected, all of the elements of that 400, when it gets to that point where it needs to transfer over into forgiveness, because there's a disconnect there, the opening and all the 400 now flows out and drops away. It does not move on to its purpose. But if we are connected with God, if we rejoin, reconnect back with Him, we confess our sins, we ask God to forgive us, we operate and forgive us, we're now rejoined with God's energy, God's power, we're in the zone. Now all the energy of the 400 will now flow through us, flow through forgiveness, and all the energy of the 400 that is seeking expression to the earth realm will manifest in the physical form, and people will see it as a miracle. So we decree that miracles can and do happen, and this particular principle of Mark 11 can and work in your life as a trainer, can and work in the life of the young people if they are taught how it works. We thank you so very much for listening to Mark 11:22. God bless you. Bye-bye.